Silence of the Heart, Robert Adams, Chapter 11. There is really nothing to say. Words are superfluous. The only reason I use words is so you can detect the silence in the words. Silence is truth. You cannot explain truth in words. The words become meaningless, redundant. The truth comes to you of its own free will. When you prepare yourself through deep surrender to yourself, giving up all attachment, giving up your body, your mind, and everything that is important to you, to the self. As long as you are holding on to anything, the reality will evade you. The reality only comes when you give up yourself, when you give up your ego, when you give up your needs, your wants, trying to make something happen, desires, when you give up trying to become self-realized, when you just give up, then something wonderful happens. You begin to expand, not your body, but the consciousness which you are. You become all persevering, all pervading, absolute reality. It happens by itself. Student, to whom do I surrender, Master? Robert, to yourself, the self that is omnipresent, omnipotent, omnipotent, the self that is all pervading, the self that is ultimate oneness, pure awareness, Sat Chit Ananda, Parabrahman. Surrender to the self, for you are truly that, and you are amazed by what you have heard. You begin to do just that while you are at work, while you are washing dishes, while you are watching TV. As you're washing dishes and while you're watching TV, you always remember to surrender. And one day the inner guru pulls your mind inward to the source and you awaken. You become liberated. You become yourself. Then you are free. There is nothing in this world or anywhere else that can affect you or cause harm to come to you unless you believe it. The growth of the world is made up of mental beliefs. Everything that you behold is a projection of your mind. For instance, your body is not the same as it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago or when you were first conceived. How can you therefore say that the body is real? The world is not the same as it was 20 years ago. Everything has changed. So how can you possibly say that the world is real? Most of us are afraid to get into that subject, for we begin to feel that nothing is permanent. And this brings fear. If nothing is permanent, then who am I really? What am I? Where did I come from? What is the source of myself? These questions can only be answered by you. There is something more beautiful, more grand, more wonderful than you could ever imagine that exists within you, which is the substratum of all existence. Yet, in order to feel this joy, this bliss, in order to find total freedom from life's so-called burdens, you have to dig for yourself. You have to give up something. You cannot stay the way you are with the same disposition, the same values, the same preconceived ideas, the same concepts, and be free. You cannot do this. You have to do an about face and totally give up your ideas about life. Totally surrender your ego, your mind, your body, your preconceived ideas. To whom do you surrender this? To yourself. Yourself is going to say to God, but who do you think God is? God does not want your problems. Why should you give God your burdens? Find out who God is, from where this God came, and you will soon realize that you have created God in your image. There is no such God, but it is better than nothing. It is good to know that you have some big daddy in the sky somewhere who you can cry to, who you can scream at, who you can blame for all your problems. Yet as we grow, as we unfold, as we let all this stuff go, let go of everything that we've been holding on to, then something happens. We become lighter. The burden seems to disappear by itself. The only burden you have ever had is in your mind. There is no other burden. See if you can stop your mind for a few seconds and see how peaceful you are. Then there are no thoughts, there are no fears, there are no worries, there are no anxieties, no desires, no wants, no greed, no hurt, no enemies. It is the mind, the thoughts that cause these things to come. We actually create these conditions. We create our own reality. We think of the kind of life, you're living today, your possessions, your friends, your loved ones, your employees. Do these things come to you through luck or chance? Of course not. You have created all these things, for you have believed in the false self. You have imagined you are a human being who has to go through all these experiences. You have been brainwashed since you were little to believe these things. So if you really want freedom, liberation, you do not go searching for it. It is nowhere to be found, for it already exists within yourself. You are already that. So where can you go searching for it? Who can give it to you? If you want water, you have to turn on the tap. You do not look at the tap and scream and cry, I want water. You turn on the tap and you have water. When you were a little kid, you did not know how to turn on the tap. Therefore, if you wanted a drink, you would cry and make a fuss, and your mom or dad would open the tap and give you a drink. So, can you drink from the spring of eternal life, which is your reality? Say, Lord, take my anger, take my greed, take my temper. I give it all up totally. You have to turn on the tap. You turn on the tap by letting go of everything that you are, everything. When I say everything, I mean everything. You have to turn yourself inside out. Can you imagine how you would look turned inside out? That would not be a pretty sight. But most of us believe in Advaita Vedanta, that if you hear the right word, that if you awaken through the grace of a sage, you will be free. This is true in some cases, but these people that you have read about in these holy books who are touched by the grace of a sage, these people have done their homework prior to this happening. You have to want it yourself. And when you want it bad enough, something will happen to you. You will desire liberation more than anything else in life. This means you have begun to give up the rest of the stuff we have talked about. That is the only way to desire liberation. This is the legitimate desire because you are not really asking for anything. You are giving up everything that you don't need anymore. Your anger, your pettiness, your bad disposition, your temper, your greed, all of the things you were carrying around with you for so long. This is how you desire liberation. By speaking to the Lord within. This is total surrender. Lord, take my anger, my greed, my bad disposition, my temper, and you give it up totally. Once you do this, automatically you are liberated. So you see, it is not the other way around. It is not trying to find freedom, liberation, self-realization to add to what we already are. You cannot add one iota to what you already are because you are all full up with your hard-won garbage. You therefore have to empty the garbage can, turn yourself upside down and empty yourself out. And it is then that you will find that you are already free. And even as I talk to you about these things, some of you here are so full of yourself with a small s, with your ego, that you will never, never, never let go completely and give up all your stuff. For your ego has been telling you all these years, if you do this, you will be nowhere. But isn't that exactly where you want to be? Nowhere. When you are nowhere, you are not somewhere. And in the nowhere, there is nothing. This nothing is everything. This nothing is what you call effortless, pure awareness, absolute, pure reality, Sat Chit Ananda, Nirvana. It is what is left over after you have given up all your stuff. What you really are, you have to find out for yourself. And you do that, of course, by stopping identification with the body. Do you react to conditions? That is being yourself. It is not knowing words or paragraphs or phrases. It is not by memorizing scripture or saying things to impress others. It is by being yourself. To be yourself, you just have to stop the thinking process. Always remember, it is your thoughts that keep you from the self. Every thought that comes to you is your enemy, even the good thoughts. For the good thoughts are just leading you on. It is your mind playing tricks on you. The good thoughts are trying to make you feel that this world is real and you should strive after certain things. You should enjoy the world and take it for all it's worth. But then you have come under the law of change and you become disillusioned because the things in your life are no longer the same after a while. Then you have to jump back into yourself and take refuge in the self. When you take refuge in the self, you have peace. When you take refuge in the outside world, in a person, place, or thing, then you know the outside of the world is subject to the law of change, and it's never the same continuously. So whatever you take refuge in becomes a disappointment, whether it is a person, place, or thing. There was once a young girl who was brought up in a house of prostitution. This was her destiny at the time. She could not get away from it, but she used to pray to Ramana Maharishi, "Oh Lord, if I must go this route, be with me. I am not praying to change my life if this is my destiny, but I'm praying that your strength and your love will always be with me." Now, across the street was a so-called jnani, And he used to stand in front of the marketplace telling everyone that they are consciousness, absolute reality, preaching and screaming. This went on for years. Finally, the time came when they both died and they went before God. God told the girl, "You have to go back to earth and you have to become a jnani." And told the so called jnani, "You have to go back to earth as a snake." The man said, "Why is this, Lord? I have stole your virtues to everyone. I told all the people that they were consciousness and that they were absolute reality, and you send me back as a snake? What did I do?" And God said, "You have no heart. You came from the school of talking. All you did your whole life was talk, talk, talk. But this girl gave me her heart. She surrendered to me. She did not bemoan her fate. She just wanted me to be with her during her trials and tribulations. And I gave her the strength to carry on. So now she is free. But you still have a lot to learn. So you have to go back and start again as a snake." Now, this makes us think, what are we truly doing with our lives? We read a lot of books, we see a lot of teachers, we have a lot of head knowledge, but how many of us have given our hearts to God? How do we contact God? God, I know nothing. You are everything. And God is not far away. God is really the self. But in order to contact the self, you have got to have a lot of humility. To feel God's grace means you have to surrender completely. You have to have humility. You have to have the attitude, I know nothing. You are everything. This kind of attitude will set you free. And yet, how many of us have an attitude like this? How many of us think to become a jnani, to become self realized? We become proud, and you actually become more egotistical than you ever were before. We have a holier than thou attitude, but this will never do. There is really no difference between a bhakti and jnani. One surrenders to God and they have no other life. They realize that whatever they do, it is God doing it. Therefore, it is good. They never complain. They never think of their problems. They think of others and their problems rather than their own. And the other one realizes that the I is responsible for all of their problems and for their existence. So they trace the I back to its source, to the heart, and they become free. At that stage, there is a merging of both bhakti and jnana. Therefore, if you see a teacher who thinks they are better than anyone else and they seem egotistical, be careful. Most jnanis never take on a teaching role, and they have very little to say. After all, what is there to talk about? Just being is enough. Not being this, not being that, just being. Being at satsang. And whether I talk about ice cream or jelly beans, it makes no difference. The words themselves have no value because the sound of the words are the grace that set you free. But the meaning of the words are only interpreted in your mind. That is why whatever I say is taken differently by each one of you, for it filters through your mind and your consciousness and your beingness mix the words up. And the words come out according to your way of life. But if you listen with no mind, then you get the true meaning. In other words, do not put too much value on everything I say, but open your heart so that the grace portion of it may enter. and you may pick it up and lift yourself upward. How do you do this? Just by becoming still and stopping the mental activity. And you may stop the mental activity by any method you know. If you like to do pranayama breathing, do that. If you like to practice vipassana breathing, do that. You wish to observe your breath, do that. If you wish to practice self-inquiry, do that. In other words, do whatever you have to do to stop your mind from thinking. Vichara, self-inquiry, is only to keep your mind from thinking. That is all it is. All the practices of yoga lead to the place where you stop thinking. All of the higher religions are to make your thoughts one-pointed. And when your mind stops, you become yourself. You are free. There are no rituals you have to go through, really. You don't have to chastise yourself and try to get rid of your guilty feelings, samskaras, or anything else. Identifying with an empty mind will do. But the empty mind is not realization. It is a step before realization. Realization is not an empty mind. Realization cannot be explained. Suffice it to say that realization is beyond everything and anything you can ever imagine. But if you achieve empty mind, then you are on your way to realization. At that stage, the guru within yourself will pull you inwardly and you will awaken to yourself. So, number one, you have to develop humility. You have to open your heart to loving kindness. Number two, you have to forget about yourself and your problems as if they never existed and help others. Give of yourself to others because there's only one self, and I am that. Number three, you have to stop quoting teachers and telling yourself that I am Brahman, I am no mind, I am consciousness. That inflates your ego after a while. You have to stop comparing yourself to anybody or anything. In other words, you have to become no thing. And that hurts some of you because you say, after all, I have gone to school for 50 years. I've got a profession. I am doing this and I am doing that. And now you tell me I have to become nothing? Well, consciousness is nothing. It is nothing. What you call God is a nothing. So if nothing is good enough for God, it should be good enough for you too. Can't you see now that when you say to yourself, well, I will never be nothing. I am somebody. I have studied for years. I am somebody important. Can't you see now that this is what holds you back? Every sage has come to the point where they have thrown away the scriptures, thrown away the books, thrown away their body, thrown away their knowledge, thrown away themselves with a small s. When you get rid of all that stuff, then you become the self. Can you see now why it takes so long for some people? Because they are holding on to something. They say, I cannot let go of this. I can never let go of that. I don't mean you get to the point where you don't care. I don't mean you have to quit your job or leave your family or go anywhere. You have to do all of this mentally. You do all this in your mind. You use your mind to do all these things. And then the mind turns within and disappears into the heart. So take a look at your life and see what is holding you back. What are you attached to? What do you think is important in this world? You cannot have both. You cannot mentally be attached to person, place, or thing and awaken at the same time. If you want liberation, you have to pay the price. And the price is letting go, giving it all up, surrendering. Having perfect faith that all is well. Not trying to interpret what all is well means. Just realize that everything is in the right place just the way that it is. Don't interpret it. There are no mistakes. As you begin to dwell on this, as you begin to dwell on these things, automatically you will come to the place where you realize the last thing that needs to go is this I. Everything has to be attached to this I. Everything has been attached to this I. But you see how long it takes to get there? You have to do everything else first. This is why it is dangerous for some people to just teach jnana marga, the path by itself. For egotistical people become greater egotists. It builds up your ego. You have to have humility first and go through these things we discussed. If you really want to do this, you will. You will not do this by taking action, but by sitting in silence and surrendering your mind and your body to the self. I am will take care of itself. You see, I am is your real nature. Therefore, you do not have to try to bring it about. All you have to do is realize that this stuff is holding you back and it has to be given up. Everything has to go. Your whole belief system. What are you holding on to? Think. What is in your mind that is so strong? Is it your fear? Is it your job? All of these things are meaningless if you want to awaken. You will still have your job. You will still do whatever you came here to do. I have to emphasize this because we always believe, and the question that I get from most of you is that, how will I function if I do what you say? And I keep telling you, have no fear, you will function. You will function much better than you can even imagine. It is hard right now working with your ego to think, how can I function without a mind? But you will. Here is something that cannot be explained in words. When you get to the ultimate state, you become human like everyone else. That is why it is difficult to know what a sage is, because a true sage appears no different than you or I. The ultimate state is functioning like everyone else, except there is something inside. There is something that makes you understand that you are like a mirror, and your body and your affairs and everything else in the universe is a reflection. You become both. It appears that you act out of your humanhood, but you are not a human. And this is the most difficult state to explain, for it is beyond words, it is beyond thought, it is beyond reasoning. You cannot be reasonable and be liberated. It is beyond every human faculty. That is why you cannot think about it, and you cannot try to explain it, and you cannot even discuss it. All you can do is to do whatever you have to do to get rid of all your stuff. That is all, and everything will take care of itself.